Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is Michael Mile here with the Hurricane Outlook and discussion for November 17th, 2020, recorded on 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. While taking a wide look across the tropical Atlantic this afternoon, we have Tropical Storm Iota, which made landfall along Nicaragua and Honduras last night as a very strong Category 4 hurricane with sustained winds of 155 miles per hour. That has now moved over the very mountainous region of the Nicaraguan area and also into Honduras. And because of that, now the storm has started to weaken substantially and is now only a tropical storm at the moment, but dumping a large amount of rainfall still at this current time. Elsewhere across the tropics, again, we have some tropical waves in the lower latitude with the intertropical convergence zone that is now sliding southward once again for the kind of retreat of the hurricane season. We also have very nice weather across most of the central United States. You can see all the way from really South Dakota, Kansas, Nebraska, all the way down towards Florida. Progressively, we have a cold front that has slid through, providing some very nice clear weather for the region. Now, if we focus specifically here on Tropical Storm Iota, again, sustained winds right around 60 miles per hour, now moving towards the west here at about 9 miles per hour. And again, this is a slow mover, but it is getting out of here, but not before dumping a lot of rainfall. Again, you can still see the low level cloud features are still evident in here. There's still a closed circulation. Again, this is actually coming pretty close to passing into El Salvador and could make it as a strong, or a weaker tropical storm into portions of El Salvador. Now, this mid level circulation, again, the low level circulation will die out, but the mid level energy will move back over water in the eastern Pacific basin. And we'll have to watch there for development, but I'm not really too enthused about any development in this particular region. But again, it's just something to watch. But again, lots of heavy rainfall going to be coming for portions of Nicaragua and Honduras, El Salvador. You can see these rain bands here on the leading edge of the storm, kind of rotating around like that. And this will be the main occurrence throughout the day today and into tomorrow. And we also have some convection that is still out here over the open water that is going to be, with time, kind of moving inland over portions of Nicaragua and Honduras there along the coastline. So any recovery efforts are going to be hindered by some of this, shower and thunderstorm activity right along the coastline there. But other than that, again, even some convection all the way down here in the southern part there of Nicaragua. But other than that, everything is now starting to quiet down along the coastline of Nicaragua and Honduras. 5 day tropical weather, or the 5 day outlook for the tropical storm Iota right now. Again, sustained winds right now about 65 miles per hour, moving towards the west here. Again, expected to remain a tropical storm through tomorrow. Again, this is only by about 6 p.m. today. By 6 a.m. then tomorrow, this is now a post-tropical depression over El Salvador, and that mid-level energy will then pick up then into the eastern Pacific basin, where we'll have to watch maybe for some development out of this as that energy gets carried towards the north and west there, back over the open waters. Elsewhere across the tropics, we only have one additional area with a 30% chance of development. We'll be talking about that here sporadically in just a moment. This is something we haven't looked at in a while. This is the Madden-Julian oscillation, basically the velocity potential at the 200 millibar layer in the atmosphere. And what we're really looking at here is, again, if you remember all the way back towards several months ago, these reds here, this is basically a subsidence layer in the atmosphere. This really suppresses a lot of upward moving air. So all of this is basically downward moving air, and all of this blue and purple in here, this is upward moving air in the atmosphere. So you got an upward phase right here, and over the eastern Pacific right now, you have a downward phase, or a suppressive phase. And then across the Atlantic Basin, we have that's been around for several months, just kind of percolating out here across Africa and the Atlantic. But with time, because we are now starting to exit the African standing wave, it's still there, but it is getting ready to potentially shut off here. You can see that this Madden-Julian oscillation, the suppressed phase, will once again come over the Atlantic Basin, still kind of centered in the eastern Pacific, but this will be crossing into the Atlantic Basin throughout the next couple of weeks. And what this is going to do is typically suppress development of the storms. So, really, that any storm that tries to get going in the East Pacific or the Atlantic will probably be kind of swelled down. It will be held down, and we probably won't get much development. And then this goes out all the way till December 1st. This is about 2 weeks from now. So we're about 2 weeks away from actually entering December, which is crazy. However, you can see still a lot of downward moving air across portions of the western Atlantic basin. So this should be, I think we had our last oorah basically with the hurricane season this year. And I think, hopefully, we should be done after really Iota. I think that was our last major hurricane, and certainly probably the last hurricane of the season. We still do have this African standing wave, but you can see it's now getting shut down, and actually it's now starting to drift further eastward again. That African standing wave was actually positioned, you can see here, actually positioned much more over the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic. Creating the Indian Ocean dipole there, and then eventually this has now shifted back and closer even into the West Pacific basin. So you might see some activity there in the West Pacific. It's been certainly very quiet there this time of the year. It's certainly been very quiet, but we'll see how that ends up going over the next several weeks. Now, one thing to really pay attention to, especially because we are now entering the off season here, is going to be the sea surface temperature anomalies. These are the departures from normal, and you can very clearly see we've been in a fairly significant La Nina, a weak to moderate La Nina pattern over the past several months. And again, we talked about this in the off season. We'll start talking about this more as we head closer, towards the off season. Then we'll revisit this pretty much every week here in the off season. But you can see again we have a fairly strong signal here for a La Nina in the eastern Pacific basin. And in the Atlantic, it is still very warm. And again, the hurricanes have not really done much to take a lot of that water content out of the ocean and displace it and kind of disperse it elsewhere. You still have a very strong signal for above average in the main development region of the Atlantic Basin. Very warm, above normal comparatively in the Caribbean as well. Very warm in the subtropical Atlantic and over most of the Gulf of Mexico and Western Atlantic. We are still running well above normal in every single location basically in the Atlantic Basin. There's just a couple of areas that are now starting to show up below average or right near average here, but these will start to kind of get eroded with time. We start to get the fronts that comes down. We get stronger trade winds that increase. This should start to mix up the water further, and we should start to lose a lot of this warm water anomalies in the Atlantic. Conversely, out here, we will likely be staying in a La Nina phase at least through the winter. Then after that, of course, it's just really anyone's guess, but this is going to promote a lot of rain and storms up towards the north here, and warm and dry weather across the southern parts here of the United States, especially the southeast and Florida, should remain relatively below normal precipitation and above normal in the heat for this winter. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. Now, if we actually look at the actual sea surface temperatures, these are the sea surface temperatures at the very tops here of the surface of the water. And what we're actually looking at here is the CDAS methodology. It's just another way of actually measuring the water temperature there at the very surface. But you can really see that we still have very warm waters, 28 to 29 degrees Celsius waters across most of the Caribbean for this time of the year. But if you look in the Atlantic Basin, you can see these water temperatures now 25, even some 22-degree waters, right along the even the Florida coastline here, kind of near Cedar Key, Louisiana, obviously, which has been devastated by hurricanes this year. Ada, which obviously hit Florida, a couple of short days ago. But down here in the Caribbean, we still have a very warm water, region, and even in the Western Atlantic, for what it's worth, north of Puerto Rico, we still have some very warm water. So there's still warm waters out here that do have to be monitored. It is still the hurricane season. And then out here in the eastern Pacific, we do have a couple of areas of 30-degree Celsius waters. But these are starting to get turned up as well. And again, a lot of strong upper level winds will be cutting across here. And we're just really changing the overall background environment. So it really does look like that the hurricane season will be ending relatively soon. Now, if we look here on the GFS forecast, this is the 850 millibar geopotential height. And again, we just kind of want to look at if there's really anything potentially to develop over the next several weeks. We really don't see much. Again, this is the circulation here associated with iota. Elsewhere, you got a big trough that's digging in up across here and a big ridge that's over across Texas right now. This is basically a cold dome ridge, so it's dropping a lot of cold air into portions of the central United States. You don't really see much in the pattern. However, if we actually switch this to the 200 millibar layer, this is looking at the 200 millibar wind. And again, you can actually see things in much better detail here. And what you're really looking at, again, we have this big jet, this big trough that's been digging down across the central United States and then eventually has skirted towards the north and east. So this has, brought a lot of cold weather up towards the north and east, even some snow showers across that area. This big area of low pressure sitting up here across the Canadian Maritimes and the Canadian prairies up there. Elsewhere, again, fairly strong subtropical jet across Florida and the Gulf of Mexico right now. A tropical upper tropospheric trough right here over portions of really over the Western Atlantic, creating a lot of strong vertical wind shear across the main development region. So that area is likely going to be shut down. Now, you'll notice what starts to happen here after 5 days. If we go into the Atlantic or into the Caribbean here, you notice that what starts to happen is we get kind of this tut feature to actually move across this area. We get the stream, the subtropical jet to actually come a little bit further south, and it's creating some strong vertical wind shear even in the northern half of the Caribbean across here. So this should prevent a significant and substantial development. We have another trough comes through. Now, after this point, again, you can see that the pattern becomes relatively unfavorable. This is the whole forecast period. No real area of favorability actually develops here across the Caribbean and elsewhere. There's just really no area for storms to really develop that's in a very favorable state anymore. So it appears as if we are starting to get towards the end, finally, after what has been an extraordinarily long hurricane season. If you look here at the Euro, much of the same general idea here going with the European forecast. Again, mainly looks to be just a lot of extratropical systems and, higher latitude systems. This is something interesting in the Euro, after 5 days on November 23rd, maybe an area right here. But elsewhere, we got a big ridge of high pressure out across here. So, again, the tropics are now starting to quiet down. It looks like that we're going to have a pretty good quiet period up ahead. So certainly take this time to, enjoy the quietness in the tropics. So again, we do have one area to watch, but those chances have actually decreased, and it looks like they will further decrease with time. All right. So that being said, hope you all have a great rest of your afternoon and evening. Of course, I am Michael O'Malley. I'll talk to you guys again some more tomorrow.